And chapter 18. This morning we've been doing a series kind of sporadically spread out over the last few months, regular heroes or unknown heroes. I kind of changed the title depending on the person. We looked at Simon of Cyrene, a regular guy who had an opportunity to do something, to walk with Jesus, to carry the cross, and it changed his life. It changed his family. It changed his hometown. It changed the whole Greek people. We looked at Bezalel from the book of Exodus, and we challenged you to find who this guy was before we came here, and just a regular guy called to build something by God, and he did a marvelous work. And today we want to talk about another unknown man in the Bible. His name is Ittai. How many of you know who Ittai is? All right, nobody know. Oh, we got one hand go halfway up, so he sort of knows. Another hand all the way up, but you were here last night, so that doesn't count. 2 Samuel chapter 15, Ittai. Before we actually get into our text, let's get a little background started. Ittai was a Philistine from Gath. Anyone heard of that term, Philistine? Does that sound familiar? Philistine, what are the Philistines known for? Who's the biggest, most famous Philistine that we've heard of? Goliath. All right, you guys aren't shy this morning. Goliath, the big man that David fought, the shepherd boy, killed him. Well, Gath was the home of Goliath, and Ittai was a Philistine from Gath, the home of Goliath. The Philistines were enemies of the people of Israel, and Ittai was a large and well-respected warrior. It never calls him a giant, but the way that he's written about and how it describes the people around him, it always makes him look bigger than the people around him. So he was a large warrior, well-respected man, had followers there in Gath. And he had watched that one day as David, the champion from Gath, went out challenging day after day the nation of Israel. Ittai would have been there as a warrior that day that little shepherd boy, that young teenage boy, stepped out of the ranks of Israel with no armor, with no sword, with no helmet, no spear, with a slingshot and a pouch full of rocks. And he heard as Goliath threatened the boy, saying, "What is this? Am I a dog that you're sending a boy out to me? Who do you think I am? What is this? Some sort of joke? I'm going to kill you and feed your body to the dogs." Something along those lines. And then he heard, Ittai in the crowd would have heard this little shepherd boy threaten this giant champion Goliath, saying those words, "You come with a sword and a spear and a javelin, but I come," does anyone know what he said? "In the name of the Lord, the God of Israel." And then David had a few more words. As Christians in the modern day era, we usually stop the quote right there. "I come in the name of the Lord." But he actually goes on to say, "And this day I will kill you and cut your head off and feed your body to the birds," right? And Ittai sees this young lad step up with full faith and full courage to this giant. I imagine he thought the giant was going to win the day, but David swung that slingshot around and let it fly and hit that giant right between the eyes. And he saw Goliath fall down, and that boy grabbed that huge sword and cut the head of that giant off, and he won the day. And I believe that day something changed in Ittai's heart. I believe that day he came to faith in the Lord, the God of Israel, because after this event, we see shortly after this event, David had to run from King Saul, didn't he? Do you remember Saul became so jealous, and David had to run? Do you know where he ran? He ran to Gath. Who's going to look for David in Gath, right? He had just killed the biggest Philistine from Gath. He hid there for a short time, and it looks like he spent time with Ittai in Gath. And there was another period of David's life where he spent about a year in Gath. And so he developed this relationship with this man named Ittai who we're studying today. And we see today, as we're going to read our text, a few peculiar words. As David has to leave Israel, there's a few groups of people that leave with him. But David had a son named Absalom. And Absalom was tall, he was handsome, he was well-spoken, he was athletically gifted. And the people gravitated towards Absalom. And over the years, Absalom started to develop some contempt in his heart for his father, King David. And then there was an event that set Absalom over the top. When Absalom's half-brother, Amnon, raped his sister, Absalom was furious. And David grieved, but he really didn't do anything to Amnon. And Absalom was so angry about this, and he lost so much respect for his father over this, that he plotted and schemed to have Amnon killed, and he had Amnon, his half-brother, killed. And shortly thereafter, he started plotting to take the throne away from his father, which he did successfully for a short time. He went to Hebron, and he was bad-mouthing David and gaining a following. And long story short, he took the city of Hebron, and then he was coming up to Jerusalem to the north. David knew his son Absalom was coming, and he was faced with a choice. Are we going to have it out right here in the city? Am I going to war with my own son in the city that I love? Or am I going to leave knowing that the people are swayed his direction? And so David decides to leave Jerusalem as his son is coming with an army of people following him. And so he leaves, he crosses the brook Kidron, and he is going to head up north towards the land of Ephraim. And as he is leaving, he stops at the brook to see who is following him. And in our text today, chapter 15, verse 18 and so on, we see a group called the Cherethites and a group called the Pelethites. The Cherethites were, when you look it up, they were simply mercenaries, hired guns. David hired an army to go with him. Maybe they were already there, I'm not sure. But he had guys that weren't necessarily warriors from Israel, they're hired hands. And then the Pelethites, that was an interesting one. Those men were Philistine men that as David had become king, and a successful king, for years he kept these men with him to be couriers and bodyguards. They ran messages back and forth to Gath, to the land of the Philistines, and back to David, and they would be his bodyguards. He greatly trusted them. So as they're crossing the river, he sees these people there, and then he sees Ittai. Let's go ahead and read it together, starting in verse 17 of chapter 15. Then the king, King David, went out with all the people after him. So he's leaving Jerusalem. Very difficult time in David's life. And he stopped at the outskirts. Then all of the people, the servants, passed before him, the Cherethites, those are his mercenaries, the Pelethites, those are his bodyguards and Philistine couriers there, and all the Gittites, those are the men from Gath, 600 of them. They followed him from Gath, and they passed before the king. Now among those men from Gath, he sees this man right here in verse 19. So the king said to Ittai, he's our guy, the Gittite, why are you also coming with us? Return and remain with the king. He's talking about Absalom. Go back to Jerusalem and be with Absalom, for you are now a foreigner in exile from your own place. He couldn't go back to Gath. He had now just sided with the enemy. He had been buddies, or at least had some respect, go back and forth, David and Ittai. But now Ittai had taken his people, left Gath, and joined the enemy of his state. And David knows you can't go back. You're now disgraced from your people. But you can go to Jerusalem. Absalom is not there yet. He says, you only left yesterday, verse 20. In fact, you only came out yesterday. Should I make you wander up and down with us, since I don't even know where we are going? Return and take your brothers back, and mercy and peace and truth be with you. We'll read Ittai's words in a moment. What's happening here is Ittai knows that David is leaving Jerusalem. He knows that Absalom is coming towards Jerusalem. And Ittai has great respect and some sort of a friendship with David, enough to say, you know what, I am leaving Gath, the home of the Philistines, the home of my fathers, to go be loyal to David. I am going to meet him out in the desert before he gets too far. And he meets them before they cross the river. And David says, what are you doing? You know now that you've done this, you can't go home. You could go back to Jerusalem. Do that. Go back to Jerusalem, the city on the hill with the great walls. Absalom will absolutely accept you. You can have a home. You can have a place there. You can be safe there. If you follow me, I don't even know where I'm going. You want to go up and down the desert with me? Don't do that. And here we see Ittai's response, verse 21. But Ittai answered the king and said, turn 2 pages instead of 1. Here we go. Ittai answered the king and said, as the Lord lives. So we know that Ittai had faith in the Lord right there. And as my Lord the king lives, surely in whatever place my Lord the king shall be, whether in death or in life, even there your servant will also be. And then David said, all right, well, I really need you anyway, so let's cross the river. David gave him his chance, and Ittai said, no, as the Lord God Almighty lives. The Lord, all in caps, is the Hebrew word Yahweh, I am who I am. He used the name of God. As the Lord, your God, lives, and as long as you live, I'm going with you. And a modern translation might be, and whatever happens, happens. If we live, we live, and if we die, we die. But I've made my choice. Our first point this morning is from Gath to the path. It's the choice that Ittai had to make, to leave Gath and join David on the path. It's true and it rhymes, so it's a good point for this morning. From Gath to the path. Ittai left his home, he left his country to join King David. The word Gath in Hebrew means wine press. And for our application today, we'll make it a picture of wine and comfort. That he left his home, he left his walls, he left where he was comfortable, the land of wine and comfort, to meet David at the path. And that path where he met him was at the brook Kidron shortly thereafter. Anyhow, and the word Kidron means dark. So he's leaving what is comfortable and what is known and what is safe in order to go out into the darkness and the unknown with his friend King David. There's something about that calling. There's something about meeting our King on the road, meeting King Jesus on the road, and getting out from where we're comfortable and walking with Jesus on that path. My kids like to go for walks on the path. There's a path not far from our house, just half a block down is the walking trail in La Quinta Cove. And sometimes we go out there and you never know what's going to happen out there. Twice in a row this last week, we saw a stray cat. That's big news in my house. A cat without a collar, really dirty, lumps on its head, eating ants. That's a big deal to us. Sometimes we'll see moths, once in a while a butterfly or a lizard. They love to go out there. My 8-year-old, my 6-year-old, my 2-year-old. And my 2-year-old likes to go out there all the time. All the time she'll say, let's go for a walk. And I'll say, oh, we can't go for a walk. We got to go in the car, and we got to go here or there. And then she'll say, okay, I'll drive. That's what she'll tell me. She's 2. She'll go, okay, I'll drive, Daddy. I said, no, you can't drive. Get in your seat. But she loves to go to the path. And we saw that cat on the path, and we gave the cat a little chicken. Chicken's all right for a cat, right? All right. I don't have a cat. So gave the cat a big deal. And at night, she didn't want to go to sleep because she wanted to go back to the path. And I said, Brookie, you need to go to sleep. We can get some sleep. And in the morning, we'll wake up early. We can go out to the path, and we can look for the cat. So you go to sleep, okay? In the morning, after you sleep, when you wake up, I'll take you back to the path. She said, okay. She closes her eyes. She doesn't move, and she's breathing. I thought, oh, my goodness. We're skipping the 12 trips to get a drink of water tonight? Like she's just going to sleep, just like that. I start to back out real quietly. I think she's already asleep. And then she pops up, 90-degree angle, real quick. Whew, Daddy, I'm awake. Let's go see the tat. As if that was a full night's sleep. I said, in the morning, we'll wake up. She wanted to get out there. She wanted to get out on that path. She wanted to have that adventure. And in the same way, we need to have that desire to get out of the ordinary everydayness of life. And even here's a picture of leaving Gath, leaving that old life, that sinful life, that life of being enemies with the people of God, enemies with God himself, and saying, I'm leaving Gath to go join the King on the path. And I imagine, I look around the room, I know most of you, you've already made that decision that I'm leaving behind the past. I'm no longer an enemy of God. I am now becoming one of the people of God, and I am following God's anointed king. At that point it was David, but now we worship his anointed king Jesus. But Ittai had to leave his nation of Israel, enemies with them, and he was aligning himself with David, the biggest enemy of the Gath, of the Philistine people. And he is now disgraced from his home, and he can't go there. He had to leave his home. And when you think about it, he wasn't leaving his home for another piece of real estate. He wasn't just packing his things and moving. He was leaving the comfort, literally, of 4 walls, a bed, a well where he could get fresh water, a place where he had fresh food and animals and things to eat, and walls and a society around him that was protecting him and his family. He was leaving that to a place where he would have no bed. He would have no walls. He would have no society around him to protect him. He would have no comforts and no sense of where they were going, but he knew in his heart that it was right. And that's our decision to follow Jesus, to say, Jesus, I'm leaving behind all of these things, the life of wine and comfort, and I'm following you and meeting you on that path. He would have to forfeit his home. He would forfeit any inheritance he may have had in his future. And he had to leave his culture, didn't he? He was used to a certain way of life. This is how my people live. This is how we worship our gods. This is what we do. This is what we eat. All of that was now gone, and what was he going to do? Take on David's culture, which was a radically different culture. When we give our heart to Jesus, we leave that old culture, we take on a radically different culture. And what's ironic about this whole situation is Ittai lived among the faithless, didn't he? He lived among the enemies of God, but there's a time and a place where God gives us that chance to go from being the faithless to being the faithful. You got it. It sounds a lot like faithless, except the ending is different, right? We have a chance for the faithless to become the faithful, and that's a beautiful thing. If you're here this morning and you're saying, I feel like a faithless one. I feel like a failure. I feel like a sinner. You have time and time again opportunities to go from being the faithless, the enemy of God, to being the faithful, a friend with God, one walking with the King on the path. Like Simon of Cyrene, we talked about him, and Bezalel, these regular guys, and then they have an opportunity to join with the king. They have an opportunity to join the leader. They have a calling to carry out. And as Simon of Cyrene carried that cross for Jesus, everything changed. There was those pivotal points in their lives. Will you join Jesus on the road? Will I join Jesus on the road? Ittai's response to David. David said, don't do this. All right, you can't go home, but you can turn. Jerusalem's just a few miles back. Go back to Jerusalem. My son, the king Absalom, he'll take you in. He'll put you to use. He'll give you a position there. He'll gladly take you in. Go back. But what was Ittai's response to David? He said, I'm committed to the Lord. Secondly, I'm committed to you. Whether I live or whether I die, whatever happens, happens. Like two soldiers pinned down in Iraq, in a building, in a home, and they're taking fire, and one knows he's got to be the first out the door while the other lays cover. He's got to get to the next corner. He's got to turn and lay cover while the second man goes. They look at each other, and that moment comes where you can't just cower down in a corner anymore, and you got to get up and go, and they look at each other and say, you ready? I'm ready. Whatever happens, happens, but we need to do this. And that time has to come in our walk with the Lord. Lord, I'm stepping out in faith, and whatever happens, happens, and I trust you. In life or in death, I'm trusting you. It's the spouse who has a spouse with cancer or fighting an illness, and you say, I'm here with you. Lord, I trust in you completely. I'm out here trusting in you, and Lord, I'm not leaving the side of my loved one. Whatever the case may be, through substance abuse, it's trusting the Lord, putting it in his hands, and staying loyal to one another. That was Ittai's response to David. And our response to Jesus, Lord, I'm committed to you. Lord, I'm committed to your people, and I place my life in your hands, and whatever happens, happens. Our first point this morning, from Gath to the path, leaving that old life behind and meeting the King on the path. Secondly, we see verses 22 and 23. He says, go over and cross over, and the people were all crossing over, and they were sad at this change. But he tried to convince him. What did David try to convince him, ever so briefly, to do? Because David knew he really needed this guy. He knew if he had any chance, he needed his buddy by his side, and he needed these 600 warriors he was bringing with him. Absalom would chase David down with over 20,000 men, 25,000 guys maybe. David's at maybe 3,000 to 4,000 walking out. He knew he needed him. So he says, what? Okay, you can't go back to Gath. Go where? Go back to Jerusalem. Ittai probably looked over his shoulder, sees this city fortified up on a hill, the walls, the place where he could build a new life for himself. The walls, the security of Jerusalem. Ittai had committed enough to leave Gath, but would he be committed enough to bypass those walls in Jerusalem and continue to walk with David? The city on the hill with large walls. Absalom would accept him there. He could make a home for himself there, and it wasn't too late. But what was the problem with going back to Jerusalem? What would the fundamental problem be with doing that? Is that the rightful king on the throne in Jerusalem? Is that God's anointed one in Jerusalem? It's not. Would it be a comfortable place for him to lay down? It would. Could he be a man of great influence there? Yes. Could he make a name for himself there? Yes. Would his people and his children be safe there? Yes. He could have shown David his loyalty and at the same time had a much easier life. But that's not what he decided to do, was it? And as we leave Gath and we join Jesus on the path, there comes that point where maybe we're walking a little bit and then we say, you know what? I could be a follower of Jesus. I could show him my loyalty, my love, and my respect, but I can do it over here where it's a lot more comfortable, where it feels a lot more secure. But the truth of the matter is it's not much more secure because you're not with God's anointed one. He could have had that. He could have had those walls. Our walls are that safe feeling, that safe Christian life, that maybe we've come out of Gath to meet Jesus, but we want to feel fortified behind those walls, where we are comfortable, where the world will accept us still, where we can find our place of security and sensibility and predictability. It's that place where we are tempted to step out with Jesus and do something that he's calling us to do, but we say, you know what, I can keep my faith and my friendship, but I'm going to do it back here, where I feel a little more safety and a little more security. Those are those walls, that feeling of safety and security, but God is saying, I have a calling for you out here. I have something more for you out here, and you're going to be uncomfortable, and you're going to be unsure, and because you're uncomfortable and unsure, what are you going to be doing? Holding on tightly to Jesus, right? See, I can't let you out of my sight because I don't know where I'm going. I don't know how to get there. I don't know exactly what I'm doing, but I'm walking with you. That's what he desires. When I was a kid, we used to play rubber band guns. How many of you have done that? Owned those little rubber band guns? Yeah, don't be shy. A lot of people with those rubber band guns. Mostly they're wooden and, like this long. We had one. It was made of plastic. We called it Big Red. It was twice as long as the others. Now, if you know anything about physics and all that stuff, what's going to happen to a longer rubber band gun when you pull the trigger? It's going to hit a little harder, right? It's going to go flying through the air. And my cousin, I don't remember how old we were, teenagers, and I had a cousin, I don't know, 5 or 6 years younger than me, and cousin John, he's just got out of the Army, so I wouldn't want to mess with him now. But when we were kids, he was a lot younger than me, and he had a big melon head, and his head hadn't caught up to his body yet. If he's watching this on the internet, I'm doing this respectfully, Army soldier. But when he was a kid, and I remember we'd shut all the lights down, we'd split teams up in the basement, we'd get our rubber band guns, everyone would get loaded up, we'd take our shirts off, so when you get hit, you'd hear someone go, ah, and you know they're out. Supposed to be honor system, but sometimes that little extra lets everyone know, okay, he's out. And we turn pitch dark. You couldn't see a thing. If you let your eyes adjust long enough, you could start to see little outlines. And I crawled and took my time crawling around the different cushions and things we had set up. And I had Big Red. I had the big one. And I got right to the wall of the enemy. They had long cushions set up. And I looked up, and I was at the base of the wall. And I saw my little cousin John with his big melon head looking up over the wall. And he had his, and he's looking around. I could just see his head moving enough. And you know that feeling when you're a kid, you can move real quiet. And your heart's going boom, 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 boom. You know the feeling? You're running hide and seek. Remember that when you were a kid? And you're crawling, and every movement is so quiet. Every breath is so controlled. Now I get up at 5:30 or 6 in the morning, and I can't do anything except wake everybody up. At some point, a cup is going to slip out of my hand. I'll close the dresser too loud, and everybody's up. I can't do it anymore. I don't have the patience. But as a kid, everything real slow and controlled. Get right to that wall, put Big Red up right under his chin, and then I'm thinking, okay, he's just a kid. Don't do it. I'm thinking, but he's the last guy left on their team. If I do this, I secure the victory. And it's right up kind of under his nose, and he can't see it. He feels nice and safe behind his big wall, just looking around, and I'm laying there right up at him. Now, I'm a nice guy. How many of you think I'm a pretty nice guy? How many of you are saying, I know the end of the story, and you're not a nice guy? All right. Well, the second crowd has it. I thought maybe 10 seconds, I sat there and thought, don't do it to the kid, man. Don't do it. And then, all right, just finish the game. And click, click, pop, ah! And then the lights all turn on. All the adults are running down in the basement. What happened? The kids, all surprised and, got hit in the face with a rubber band. And then I don't know if I got in trouble or not. Felt nice and secure behind his walls. And that's the temptation for a lot of us that have been walking with the Lord for some time now. We've shown the King our loyalty. I'll leave Gath. I'll leave my life of sin, and I'll meet you on the path. But I'm willing to stay behind these walls while you go out on an adventure. While you go out and you survive and you accomplish your purposes out there, I'm going to sit behind these walls. And I've shown you that I love you, and I've shown you that I care, and I've taken some steps of commitment to leave where I was. But Ittai wasn't about to do that, was he? He was not about to compromise in that way. Those could be our walls. And that wilderness. What is the wilderness? Here he sees David says, it's a land of going up and down. We're going to be wandering around. I don't really have a plan yet. Now, David did get a plan shortly after this, but he didn't have a plan yet. He said, you're going to be declared an enemy of your people and an enemy of my old people, and I don't have a plan. So go back. There's no boundaries out there. There's no borders out there. There's no security out there. We're going to be wandering up and down. I don't have a clear destination. What is our wilderness? It's that borderless adventure with Jesus where we're out there. And sometimes we feel in over our head or we feel overexposed, and because we do, we hold on tightly. We take special care. We're in that devotional life every day. We're leaning on Him in prayer every day. We're keeping our eyes on Him every day. Do you guys know what the safest type of gun is? Anyone know? Did they teach you? It's kind of a trick question. It's one that you know is loaded. The most dangerous one is the one on the table that you think is not loaded. If you go down to Guns of Distinction, great Christian guys that run the place, they have 2.5, 32-ounce size jars filled with bullets And it says on there, these bullets came from unloaded guns people brought into the store. 33,000 accidental discharges a year, and over 95% of them, the explanation was, I thought it was empty. That's the dangerous one, because you feel a little more comfortable with it. Oh, we'll clean it, we'll take it apart, I'll hand it to you, hand it to, oh, hey, check this thing out, right? Oh, yeah, it's not loaded. Pop! Right? The one that you know is loaded, what do? If I put it right here on the podium and say, hey, come on up and take this out of the building for me, what would you do? Well, you take it very carefully. If you've ever handled them, if you haven't, you can understand the feeling, and you keep it in the safest possible direction. You always know exactly where it is. You feel it wherever it is, and you take special care because you know it's fully loaded. I only say that to say, live a fully loaded Christian life. Don't get behind those walls where you think it's empty and you think everything's secure and you feel safe, like my cousin up behind those walls. That's actually the worst place to be. The best place to be is knowing this life is fully loaded. My life is totally in with Jesus. I need to handle it with care. I need to take proper care every single day, keep it in the safest possible direction. I need to always be walking with Him, keeping my eyes on Him, because I'm not sure, He's going up, He's going down. I'm not sure where His final destination for me is, so I'm holding on tight. Does that make sense? Is that uncomfortable? It's uncomfortable. Does it make you a little nervous? It might make you a little nervous, but Ittai made that decision, and all of us should make that decision. If you felt comfortable for some time now, say, Lord, give me a calling. Call me to something. I don't know what it's going to be or where it is or how I'm going to do it, but Lord, give me a burning passion and a desire for something because I need to go out and do something with you. I've been behind these walls too long. So we see that wilderness for us is that borderless adventure with Jesus. It's that rejection of the world system. It's a life, like David said, of following up and down with the King. What is it when you walk with someone not knowing the destination? What would you call that? A walk of faith. You guys are sharp. A walk of faith. That's what we're called to do. And Ittai took that walk of faith with David. And then thirdly, we said Gath to the path. The second point, someone help me out. It's right here. Walls. There you go. The walls are the wilderness. And the third point, faith to fight in the forest. Now, I'll summarize chapter 17 for you. You can flip to chapter 18. We'll pick it up in verse 6. But that faith to fight in the forest. We need to have that faith to leave Gath and join him on the path. We need to have that faith to say, I'm going to forsake the walls of security and safety, and I'm going to go off on an adventure with you, Jesus. And then thirdly, the faith to fight in the forest. What happened in 17? They're getting some water, they're getting some rest, or they're getting ready to get some rest in a village. Get some wells, kind of regroup as they've been on the road for a long time. They know Absalom's crew is coming behind them. And then someone comes to them and says, hey, Absalom's gaining ground on you. I'm paraphrasing all of this. You guys better figure out what you're going to do. And David says, well, we're not going to sleep tonight. We're going to walk all night towards the woods of Ephraim. All right, guys, water breaks over. Well, we thought we were going to have a meal. I thought we were going to eat. We're all hungry. Skip the meal, done with the water, no sleep. Well, we had beds. We had places to sleep. We had places to rest tonight. Not tonight. We're walking all night. Maybe by daybreak, we can get to the woods of Ephraim. And so they forsook sleep. They forsook the rest. They left the wells. They left the town. They left the village. They left the meal. And they walked all night to get to the place where they wanted to be. Ittai had chosen his side. No more Gath. That's no longer an option. No more Jerusalem, the walls. There's no option to go back there either. Now he's in with David, and the fight is coming. It's just a matter of what? When and where. There's no doubt. Absalom and his crew, they're not going to change their mind and go back. The fight is coming. Do we want to fight here in this village? Do we want to fight here in this field? Do we want to fight here in this brook? No. We want to get to the woods of Ephraim, and we want to get there first. Thick woods, sharp cliffs, pits all over the place. We can set up ambushes. That's where we want to be, and we're going to sacrifice our sleep. We're going to sacrifice our dinner. We're going to sacrifice our comfort tonight. And I know we're all already tired and at the end of our rope, but we're going to march all night to get to those woods. Ittai knows he's chosen his side and that the fight is coming and that there is just a matter of when and where. Who's going to choose the when and who's going to choose the where. And Ittai and David, they plot and plan to gain a tactical advantage. They sacrificed sleep. Like I said, they sacrificed comfort. They knew the numbers would be against them. Over 20,000 against maybe 3,000 to 4,000 men. And they knew they wanted to have that fight in the woods. I have a friend who is trying to get into mixed martial arts, the MMA, the cage fighting stuff. And he's had a few fights, amateur fights at the Staples Center in Los Angeles. And he had one coming up. And he said, I just can't get bodies to spar with. And me, being as intelligent as I am, I said, well, hey, I'll do it. I don't know a whole lot of technique or tactics, but, I'm 40 pounds heavier than him, and so that makes up a little bit of the difference. And we scheduled for an early morning, and he's telling me, yeah, but, I got this fight coming up, but it'll be his first fight, so I'm not worried about him. Already, a red flag's going up, saying that's taking him a little bit lightly. Over and over, oh, yeah, I'll get him. It's his first time. I'm going to whoop him. No problem. And he calls me early in the morning, says, hey, I was up late last night, so I'm going to cancel our sparring session today. We'll do it another time. I'll go back to sleep. And we set up another time the next week, and same thing. I was up late. I'm gonna get some sleep. Canceled it. And then the third week was his fight. What do you think happened? He got whooped. First round, I think a minute 20, and he had tapped out. Why? Rather than working and pressing to gain those tactical advantages, what was he doing? Sleeping, taking the enemy lightly. How can we draw those applications to our lives? As Christians, if we've left Gath, we've left that life of sin, we've walked right past the walls where we could have just parked it until Jesus comes back, or until we breathe our last breath and we got our ticket, so we're just going to park it in the most comfortable place. But no, we got to go out and make life difficult for ourselves, don't we? We have to go out and say, Lord, I got a new mission. I got a new plan. I got something in my heart that you put there, and I got to go do it. And we're out there. What do we need to be doing? Do we know the fight's coming? Is the enemy going to come at you? Absolutely. If you're walking with Jesus, the battle is going to come. It's just a matter of when, and it's a matter of where. So we ought to be gaining the tactical advantage, shouldn't we? Maybe foregoing some sleep to be in that prayer time, to have that devotional life. Maybe rearranging our schedule to be here with the people of God, standing in faith together. Do whatever we need to do to be ready for when the fight comes. Ittai walked all night with the king. They got to the woods of Ephraim. Let's go ahead and read it. It says there, we don't see as we read it, verse 18, chapter 18, verse 6, excuse me. So they made it to Ephraim. Now all the people went out into the countryside against Israel. Now Israel's usually the good guy, but in this case, David's the good guy, and Israel is his enemy. Those are the men who were with Absalom. And the battle was in the woods of Ephraim. And the people of Israel were overthrown before the servants of David, and a great slaughter of 20,000 took place there that day. The battle was scattered all over the face of the countryside, and the woods devoured more people that day than the sword. So they took that tactical advantage. They set up ambushes. They parked up around sharp cliffs so that as the enemy would be coming around, they could hurl rocks down on them. And the actual terrain that they were fighting in was responsible for as much or more of the deaths than the actual sword-to-sword fighting. And David and Ittai, they won the day. Why? They went out, no attempt to compromise. Ittai, we saw in 15:21, was willing to die. They chose the place and the time for the fight. Do you have some issues that you're wrestling with in life? What should we do? Walk it out with Jesus. That time in prayer, that time in devotion, that time with the people of God, and then go out and meet that issue when the time is right. Amen? That's what we see these guys did. They took care of the issue on their terms, on their strength, when they had the advantage. Does the U.S. Army fight fair? When we go out to a place, do we want it to be a fair fight because it's fair and that's a good thing? Absolutely not. You know what the definition, if it's a real fight, a fight to the finish, not like a sporting fight like karate, you know what the definition of a fair fight is? One that you win, right? When it's life and death, it's the one that you win. That's a fair fight. U.S. Army doesn't. Do SWAT teams fight fair? When they crash into a building, do they fight fair? Oh, here, let us give you some vests. Here, all right, let's make sure we each have equal number of firearms, right? Do cops fight fair if they're in a fight for their life? No, they all want to have an advantage, don't they? And as Christians, and in applying this to our lives, we all should set ourselves up to have an advantage. The battles are coming. Set yourself up to be on solid ground. Set yourself up to have that advantage. The enemy went out, 20,000 died that day. Where were they fighting? In the woods of Ephraim. Ephraim means double ashes, double fruit. Sounds like gum, like double fruit gum. Double ashes, double fruit. In other words, this is going to be really difficult, but in the end, there's going to be twice the glory. In the end, you're going to be glad you did it. Good things are going to come. And some of you may feel like you're in the woods of Ephraim. You've been burned in double ashes. You've been going through hardships. You've been going through difficult times. You'd say not double. I'd say triple or quadruple or what's 5 times? Did you just say 5 times? Anyone know? Is there an oopal for 5 times or 6 times? Or do you just, I don't know. You say, I've been 10 times ashes. I've been wrestling with this for a decade. Well, guess what? You got 10 times the fruit coming. You got 10 times the blessing coming. Just hang in there in the woods of Ephraim. They had given up a lot to be there. We ought to give up a lot to gain those advantages to win the day. And then lastly, we want to make sure, and this is a no-brainer, that we win the war. How did they win the war? How did they win this battle? God gives the victory, but they had to take the ground. God wanted them to have the victory that day, but what if David had said, well, let's just sleep tonight. We're all tired. Let's sleep outside this village tonight, and we'll see how far we can get tomorrow. And then they meet Absalom's men on a plain field, 4,000 on 25,000. What's going to happen? They're probably going to lose, right? God will give the victory, but we have to take the ground. Maybe I'm touching a sore subject here, forgive me, but if you pay $150,000 for your kid to go to college, you give him the victory, but what's the kid got to do? He's got to gain the ground, right? He's got to get the grades. You can say, here's $30,000, we'll pay your first year of college, and the kid doesn't study at all. What's going to happen? Does he get that little piece of paper saying, look, I did it. I have a degree. Does he get the win? He does not. God's saying to you today, you've left Gath. You've stepped out in faith. I want to give you the victory, but you got to walk it out, right? What did he say to Joshua? Moses is dead. Cross the Jordan River. Every place the sole of your foot treads, I give to you. I want to give it to you, but you got to walk it out. It's not going to be easy, but that's a part of it. That's a part of us walking together in this relationship we have together. If we can have the worship team come forward, we need to push. We need to walk. We need to grow. We need to reach that place where you can step out like David's men, like Ittai's men, and win the day. But how do you get there? You might have to give up some things. You might have to give up some comforts. You might have to fast some meals. You might have to be up all night. And then when the time comes, you stand ready to roll, and you know God is going to give you the victory. So ask yourself this morning, where am I? Am I still in Gath? Still kind of living in sin, feeling like I'm opposed to God? Leave Gath and join him on the path. Sin to new life in Jesus. Am I behind the walls just running the clock out? The easy peasy life? Do I know God is stirring something greater in me, and I just need to get out from behind these walls? I need to head out into the woods. I need to go on that adventure with God and grow closer with him. Or maybe you're right at the edge. You've walked up to the ledge, and you know the fight is about to come. Have you prepared yourself? And if you're saying no, I'd say step back for a few days. Get involved in prayer. Go deep in the walk with the Lord. Go on some prayer walks. Spend some time fasting. Prepare yourself for the battles that are ahead, because we all know that if we're walking with the Lord, Jesus says hard times will come. Tribulation will come. It's going to happen, but be of good cheer, for I have overcome. Let's stand to our feet. Let's take some time to let some of this sink in. Wherever you are in the process right now, Ittai was an enemy of God who joined his king on the path, became a hero. He became a general under David's kingship. Maybe you were in Gath. All of us were at one point enemies of God. Let's meet him on the path. Let's walk that walk with him. Let's give our all and let God bring the victory. Let's worship together. And Connie, if you can close us in prayer at the end of the song. If you'd like to come, the altars are open for prayer.